Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help. And King of Floors, your vinyl, laminate, and engineered flooring superstore.
Just ahead of Craig Button, a reminder that all guests on Tuesday are brought to you by Skipper Auto, supporting Canadian fishing families through a revolutionary seafood buying experience. Check them out online at skipperauto.com. Just before we get to Craig Button, we understand that our poll question has become our white spot poll question has become somewhat outdated, Ryan, because Bo Horvat has been named MVP of the Vancouver Canucks for this season.
Oh, my goodness. Not Besser?
No.
Surprised.
We'll talk more about that in a bit. Meanwhile, we're joined now by TSN Scouting Director Craig Button. Craig, how are you, sir?
I am good, Donnie. How are you?
Very good. I'm having a lot of fun watching these games. How much, it may be obvious, but how much have crowds made a difference for these playoffs so far?
Well, I think in a lot of ways that the passion of the fans is extended to the passion of the players. And that always helps. I think that's really significant. And I think when you can have that passion and emotion in the building, that the players are going to feed off of it. It's exciting. It's the passion of the fans that make the game. It's the emotion and the competitive of the players, that make the on-ice product so exciting. You combine the two, and, hey, listen, you got all kinds of energy.
Bruins over the Capitals 4-3 in overtime. That series is tied at 1. Taylor Hall with that massive late goal for the Bruins to force overtime. Why has he been a fit in Boston when he wasn't elsewhere?
Well, I think he was a good fit in New Jersey. He won the MVP.
New Jersey, but Buffalo, Arizona before that.
Here's what I'll say, is that, the vast majority of players need complementary players to play alongside them. And Taylor Hall is a player that moves through the neutral zone. He moves with speed. He can back up defenders. But he needs to get the puck in those areas. Well, he's playing with a centerman in David Krejci, who I think is a perfect complement for him. And then you need a centerman that can read off of Taylor Hall in the offensive zone, get to the right spot. Taylor Hall is what I call kind of a freewheeling player. He's not a paint-by-numbers player. You've got to let him kind of improvise as he goes on. And he has to be able to do those things. Well, he needs support. David Krejci provides that support. He didn't have it in Buffalo. He didn't have it in Arizona. Nico Hischier was that type of player. David Krejci now is giving to Taylor Hall exactly what he needs. And that's why he was such a strong addition for the Bruins at the trade deadline.
Craig, as you can imagine, pretty hot here in Vancouver with the futures of Travis Green and Jim Benning in ownership's hands. Craig, when you look at the Canucks, maybe a vision and a plan down the road as well, would you make a ton of changes, or would you think there's enough here just to tinker? What are your thoughts on what's happening in Vancouver this week?
Yeah, well, I guess when you have uncertainty, and we're talking about significant roles within the organization with Jim and Travis, that uncertainty is going to lead to speculation. And so then it leads to your question. I think that when you're trying to construct your team, you look and you say, okay, what do we need? Oh, you need good goaltending, you need good defensemen, you need good forwards. Well, yes, you do. And you need good players in the key positions. But you also need to construct your team with players. You need third-line players. You need bottom-pair defensemen. And so, looking at those areas and really understanding how you can address really, really important, necessary aspects of your team, that's what you have to be always focused in on. But you also have to be able to sync everything up. Okay, you draft high, you need good players. We all know you need good players. Like, who's the next person who's going to say, yeah, in a rebuild, you don't need good players? Yeah, and if you can get superstar players, yeah, that's even better. I think that the Vancouver Canucks, Demko, to me, is no question. You got Quinn Hughes on the blue line. You got Pettersson and Horvat and Besser. I think they have a lot of the really important parts of their team covered off with really good players. Now you got to build out. And you got to add those other players, but you got to also sync it up. Yeah, okay, you can say here's what. But you got to be able, okay, when's the right time to find those players? Where can we find them? What's the plan? I really think that the Vancouver Canucks, I don't know anything, Rick and Donnie, but here's how I look at the Vancouver Canucks. I think last fall, with all the uncertainty surrounding the NHL schedule, what the buildings were going to look like, knowing that the revenues were going to be way down, that the Vancouver Canucks signaled that they were prepared to take somewhat of a step back, understanding that they weren't going to just spend with revenues being down. I mean, it's already being projected that upwards of $3 billion in revenue was lost to NHL teams this year. Well, that's a huge hit. And you look at, where a team is at, and you start to look again. I go back to that sinking. Okay, was Podkolzin ready to come in last year? No. Is he ready now? Was Jack Rathbone ready to step in last year? No. Does he look like he might be more ready next October? Yes. And I think you factor all these things in together. Nils Höglander is going to be better. A healthy Elias Pettersson, which doesn't go into what you were going to do or not going to do. But I think that the Vancouver Canucks are in a good position. Now what they have to do is get a little bit more understanding of what the business operations will look like going forward, like the NHL schedule, fans, revenues, and then you have to act. And I don't think it's, to go and find really good players in different parts of your lineup isn't tinkering. It's necessary, Rick. So I think that's what they have to go and find. But I think there's a lot of important elements in place.
Craig, what have, it's been 7 years of Jim Benning. The team's still in the bottom half of the league after 7 years. What do you think about the job he's done in Vancouver since day one?
Well, let's consider what he took over. Okay, like he took over, a franchise that had some real gaps in it in terms of as they were turning from an older group of players that had a lot of success to a group that wasn't ready to continue at that same level and didn't have the players in place to do it. So again, you draft a player at 18 years of age, okay? Before that player, you're going to have players that come along a little bit ahead of time or a little bit fast. But generally, overall, you're looking at 4 to 5 years before those players can come in and make a real strong impact and contribution to your team. Okay, so we say 7 years. It's 7 years. And you look at, you draft a player in 2013, Bo Horvat. You draft a player in 2014. You draft a player in 2015. Well, you don't build your team one at a time, and that's where the syncing up has to come. I think, if anything, if I would have any, and I think it's fair, and I think Jim Benning would tell you the same thing. The first year he came in, they made the playoffs. That might have given you a false sense of maybe there's a little bit more to squeeze out. And hindsight's 20/20, and you can look back and go, maybe we shouldn't have fallen into a false sense of security in that. And I'm not suggesting they did, but maybe that pushed them along. And then they signed some free agents that we all know, Jim knows as well, they haven't been productive free agent signings. Okay, so you look at that and you can say, okay, they're not there. You can look and say the bottom half of the league for the last 7 years. The next quick rebuild will be the first one. And again, it takes time and you got to sync it all up. I think Jim Benning's done a good job. Is there areas that he wishes he could have done better? I know there is, and I know he would admit there is. But again, what are you trying to do? And I believe that from an ownership point of view, if you believe that Jim is the guy that can continue to do the work and build on the work that he's done, the good positive work that he's done, recognize where you made some missteps, then unless you can find somebody unless you've completely lost faith in them, then you should continue with them. That's how I feel.
Craig, we're out of time. Thanks so much for this. Appreciate it so much. We'll talk to you next Tuesday.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
You bet.